Okay, so today we're going to start talking about how to actually create a proper layout. All right, and before we get started, we need something to create. So I'm going to create a very simple box. So I'm going to shift and then hold down my mouse wheel and rotate or orbit around a little bit in my space. And I'm going to draw a box. And I think I'm going to have specific dimensions this time. So I'm going to do a 2-inch by 2-inch by 2-inch box. So 2, tab over to the next field, 2, hit enter. Then I got my height as 2 and enter. Yeah, nice little cubicle, you're right. Change it into conceptual just because I like that. I don't need this little graphics note. And now I'm going to do a cylinder. So I'm going to choose the cylinder primitive. And it doesn't have to be very specific, but somewhere hopefully in the middle. And I'm going to make this a 0.5 radius. And the height, I'll make it just 2.5. And look at that. That was my first mistake. All right, because it didn't actually make it on the surface where I wanted it. So I'm going to highlight it and use my gizmo arrows to kind of pop it in the middle here. Okay, so that was lesson number 1. Even though my mouse was over my box here, it drew it all the way in back. All right, but now I've got it in the middle where I want it, and I'm going to subtract it from the cube. So go to my subtract Boolean command, and I say to myself, subtract from what? Subtract from my cube. So I select it, hit enter. What am I subtracting? I'm subtracting the cylinder. Select it and hit enter. All right, so now I've got this cube with a hole in it. And it's time to properly lay it out. So I'm going to go to my A landscape.
We should do the same thing? Or
if you want to.
we can leave it on top?
If you want to follow along, follow along. If you want to just watch, you can watch. All right. And just like we always see in our 2D drawings, you know, my viewport, I can scale this 1:1 or 2:1 or something to that effect. But I'm not going to do that. All right. I'm going to click out of it. And I'm actually going to kind of zoom into my viewport, which is the magenta line here. And I'm going to delete my viewport. Okay, not the border, not anything else, just the viewport. So now the old school way of doing things is to use a command called SolviewSolDraw. Okay, so that's SolviewSolDraw. SolviewSolDraw. All right. I'm going to hit enter. Bless you. Now, I want you to really pay attention because if you make one mistake, you mess up the whole sequence. All right, so it's very important that you get the order very specifically. Okay, so first, I'm going to choose UCS. All right, and then it gives me the option. Do I have a named UCS that I want to use? Do I want to use the world coordinate system? Question mark, wildcard, or the current UCS. Okay, so by default, the world coordinate system is kind of our top-down view, so I'm going to use world. All right, now it says enter a view scale. You can always change this after the fact, but I know that my object is about 2 inches. So on this page, if I do a 1:1, I'm not gonna run into issues where I have an enlarged object taking up my entire paper space. So I'm going to keep the view scale at 1:1. So I'm going to hit enter. Then specify view center. Basically, this is a left click. All right. So if I left click in the middle of the page, it creates a giant viewport. All right. And it's basically letting me know where I want to place my top view or my world view. So if I left click a little bit to the right, it'll place it to the right. Since this is a top view, I want to place it traditionally where the top view would go in an orthographic projection. So I'm going to left click here. And then when I'm done, I'm going to hit enter. Okay, now it says specify the first corner of the viewport. Well, it already made a viewport for me, but what it wants to do is it wants to trim this out. Okay, so I'm going to drag a box around my view to create a single viewport. So I'm going to left click in the upper left hand side. I'm going to drag my mouse, and then I'm going to left click again on the bottom right. Oops, of course I moved it. Come back. All right, and what that does is that creates a viewport or trims my viewport for me, and it's asking me to enter a view name. Okay, now this is very, very important because if you make a mistake, you're going to have to do the process all over again. Okay, and if you've already entered a name, you cannot enter the same name. All right, so I'm going to call this TOP for top. Come on. Oh, looks like I'm doing it in my command view, so that's fine. All right, and then I'm going to hit enter. So this I've renamed as the top view. Okay, then I get this text box to pop up again. And now, since I have my base view down, I need to create orthographic projections from this view. So I'm going to left click on ortho. And then the prompt asks me, specify the side of the viewport to project. Well, I need to project a view down below it or a front view. So I'm going to go to my viewport and I get a midpoint OSNAP. I'm going to left click on that viewport OSNAP. Drag my mouse down. Okay, my command line tells me specify the view center. Again, you see the little projecting line. It's aligned. I can't move diagonally, but I'm going to left click and it gives me a front view. Again, giant viewport, front view. Okay, I can left click and kind of reset, but I'm happy where it is there, so I'm going to hit enter. Specify the view, first corner of a viewport. Again, drawing a box around my view. And now I have to name it. Enter the view name. So this is going to be front. And then hitting enter. And this process continues. All right. So ortho again, because I already have a view. I need to create an orthographic projection from an existing view. So ortho is what I'm going to use. And I'm going to specify a side, which will be this, the right side here. I see my OSNAP. I left click on it, drag my mouse over to the right, and left click again to place my next view. Okay. Again, left clicking to kind of get the spacing correct. I'm happy right there. I'm going to hit enter to confirm that. Then specify the first corner of a viewport. Left click, drag. Left click. Name my view. This is going to be the right view. Hitting enter. Okay, I'm done with all of my orthographic views. So I'm going to hit enter again. All right, so I've laid out my 3D model using SolviewSolDraw. Now the only problem is that it's not really a proper 2D drawing. Okay, it's still a 3D model. I still see my visualization style. So what I'm going to do is use a command called SolDraw for solid draw. So SolDraw, SolDraw, and hit enter. SolDraw. And it's asking me to select objects. So really it's telling me, all right, what viewports that contain drawings in it do you want to convert? So I'm going to left click on all 3 viewports. And when you hit enter, it's going to convert to a 2D drawing. Okay. And now that you've got this set, now you just have to do some finishing steps. In other words, make sure that all of these viewports are on your viewport layer. All right. You'll notice that when I selected them up in the layers box, it has its own layers for viewports or viewports, but it's not ours. Okay. So I want to put it on our viewport layer because our viewport layer does not plot. Right? The other thing that you'll notice in your layers is that, bless you, is that you've got a host of additional layers that have been created. All right, so you've got, I'm going to start at the top, a top dim, top hid, and top viz. A front dim, front hid, front viz. Right dim, right hid, right viz. So these are additional layers that have been created from our model and put into our layers. If I go back to model space, you can see the front and the right, depending where the top is. The top is probably right on top of my part there. All right, so it creates this additional geometry, and that's what it's creating the drawing from. Okay, so your job at this point is you can go in here, double click, remove the grid just like in any other drawing. Kind of clean it up if you like. And then you can add your center lines, add your dimensions, and do what you need to there. Notice, however, that up in the command line, or in the ribbon, rather, there is no dimensions. Okay? Because typically solid modeling is used to just model, all right, and not really to dimension. So in order to dimension, we have to use our commands on the keyboard, or you can change your ribbon back to 2D and use the traditional annotation tools. Okay, so if I type dim and hit enter, that will give me the ability to create all my dimensions. As necessary. All right, obviously put them on the right layer.